You're listening to Alt-Right Radio, the official podcast of AlternativeRight.com, an online magazine of radical traditionalism. Here is your host, Richard Spencer.
Today, it's so good to have with me Stephen McNallen. Stephen is a former educator, journalist, and soldier, and he is the founder of the True Folk Assembly, and he, perhaps more than anyone else, is responsible for the introduction of Germanic paganism to North America. So thanks for being with me today, Stephen.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm very glad to be here.
And so as you said just before we went on the air, this podcast will be a kind of virtual mead horn that we'll be passing around and hopefully generating some good conversation. Just tell me, Stephen, how did you become interested in paganism? I know you don't like that word, but Azatru, and you've been doing this since the 70s. So just give us an idea of where you were at that period of time when you became interested in pagan spirituality or the religion that's indigenous to Europe.
I was raised as a devout Catholic and was very loyal to the church. Well, basically through high school and into the early college years a bit. But even in high school, I was starting to have some real questions, some real doubts that I did not feel that Christianity could adequately handle. The whole question of free will, the nature of the relationship between the divine and the human. A lot of these were big issues to me, and I wasn't getting any answers, so I would read a bit of everything. Goodness knows, there was plenty of religious thought out there even in those days, and sure. I never really found anything that worked for me until I read a book on the Vikings. Now, it wasn't great literature, but it painted a very interesting picture of a contrast between two societies, one based on obedience to God, and one based on assertive human will and a certain dash, a certain panache that was certainly not evident in the novel among the monks. That was my starting point. I did some research. The more I researched, the more I like it. And finally the day came when I had to say to myself, not just I like this, but this is what I am. These are the gods I choose to follow.
So, Stephen, one thing that jumped out at me in your article that you wrote for Alternative Right this week was that you disagree, respectively so, with Alain de Benoit and his book on being a pagan. And Alain says explicitly that one need not believe in Thor, believe in Odin, but that one should take paganism as a kind of worldview, or look at these gods as archetypes of sorts. But your version of Azatru is obviously much more spiritual. So could you maybe explain? Because you seem to, from what I heard in your first statement, you kind of moved from respecting the indigenous religion of Europe as a worldview, but then you moved to a point where this was really your religious identity. So maybe just kind of take off on that and the difference between a worldview and real spirituality.
I certainly think that the worldview is a useful thing, and insofar as Alain de Benoit goes, I believe that his book is spot on. He draws a wonderful distinction between our native religion and the competing philosophies, so to speak. And as far as he goes, I'm with him 100%. But I feel that one has to look inside and see what they really believe. And I'm not an agnostic. I am not a materialist. I'm not a person who sees the universe as ultimately a dead place. I am a spiritual man, and I feel that to be true to what I actually believe, that I have to admit that, yes, I do follow the gods. I do honor the gods. The term worship is probably accurate, but also carries some semantic baggage with it. And I couldn't really be true to myself to just call them archetypes or to just say that this is a matter of my sensibilities.
Well, another aspect of your project is the conservation of the European people. And could you speak a little bit about how paganism is an important component about that, with that, or how maybe even Judeo-Christianity might actually be antithetical to that project of maintaining the prosperity of the European people?
Well, Richard, I believe that all, quote, real religions, all religions that are bound with the idea of a particular people and the experience of that people, these have a unique power. They are rooted in the complete experience of the group in question. They spring from the soul of that people. They spring from their way of viewing the universe, the way they relate to the divine. These religions do not easily transfer outside of that group without losing a lot of their power and their truth. The philosophical religions are quite different. Obviously, they can apply virtually to anybody. And as a result, I think it breaks down the concept of in-group and out-group. We lose a sense of who we are as a people if, in fact, every human being on the planet is potentially one of our co-religionists. I believe that it is possible to respect other peoples and to work in cooperation with other peoples, but to take them into that sacred place where we meet the ancestors and where we meet the gods is something else entirely. I think that Christianity's great problem in regard to the preservation of our people is not, as some people have said, because, well, it wussified European man. That's a whole other argument. I think that the great problem was that it broke down that distinction between us and other, between in-group and out-group, between kin and ancestors and native gods on the one hand, and the other ancestors, the other kin, the other gods or religious systems, whatever, of the rest of the planet. I feel that we need that distinction. That distinction is entirely natural. It is innate. It is something which is hardwired, not necessarily on the superficial levels, but on very deep levels. And in that sense, Jung was right. The gods, the archetypes, or whatever, do continue to live in us.
Well, let's put a little pressure on that question, because I agree completely that having a basic sense of in-group and out-group is natural and good. But it seems like actually for Christian Europe, for many centuries, they actually had that. There were certainly many Christians who very much honored their ancestors, so to speak, and had a sense of their ethnicity and even their race and larger things, and a sense of Europe as a whole. It almost seems like there's this, pretty much a kind of 20th century Christianity that's both highly sentimentalized, that's been kind of pushed left in a lot of ways, and that's much more universal. I mean, do you think that maybe what you're talking about is a kind of bad Christianity of the contemporary world, or maybe you could argue something else, which is that some of these problems that are obvious, patently obvious in Christianity now, kind of took some time to work their way out as Europeans adopted Christianity over the centuries?
Well, obviously, I would go with the latter choice.
Right.
I believe that the seeds of modern-day Christianity were laid a very long time ago. They were planted and nurtured. They remained more or less hidden, more or less unmanifest for a long, long time. But you can't go around declaring that you are the slave of your God, right, as in fact, even the apostles did. You can't go around saying, in essence, that since the crucifixion we are to worship defeat. You can't go around and saying basically that humans are nothing, that they are simply the property of some sort of a deity. You can't do these things and still maintain that inner sense of self and of self-worth and of a conviction that what we do and what we have has value, and that those things that we do and that we have should be preserved, and that in fact these things matter. They matter more than anything. They matter more than obedience. They matter more than obeying the dictates of a church or of another deity.
Well, give us a flavor, if you will, of the way that you honor the gods. I mean, I think certainly a lot of our listeners and readers are coming to Asatru or paganism for the first time, I've no doubt. So just give us a little bit of a sense of the ritual and the flavor and the camaraderie of being a pagan.
Okay, first let me just say some of the things we don't do.
Okay.
We don't wear Viking garb. We don't wear horned helmets. We don't carry swords. We don't dress up in funny clothes. Now,
well, I have to say, Stephen, I'm very disappointed.
I'm coming to that, Richard. That photo that you ran of me at the top of the article. I haven't worn anything like that in 15 or 20 years.
Uh-huh.
I have evolved. I have grown in this. When I got into this whole thing 40 years ago, my view was, I think, rather simplistic. I was a young man, just got my Army commission, off to Airborne and Ranger School. I was testosterone-laden. It was a warrior thing.
Right.
It was gung-ho. I was all for it. And since then, I've learned, well, no, a warrior is a part of a community. He is not the community.
Right.
And, yes, goddesses are just as important as gods. And I began looking much, much deeper into it. So, no, I don't wear ritual garb. It always sounds so, I feel like I'm really having to explain so many things that would be obvious anywhere else. But no, we don't get drunk and run around in the woods, hailing Odin and engaging in wild orgies. We don't slaughter goats. We don't do any of these sorts of things that people see in the movies or that they have sort of come up with in their imaginations. You will find, I think, that our rites are very restrained in many respects. They can certainly be emotionally charged, but anyone witnessing our rites is not going to see anything that they would have to cover their children's eyes in regards or anything of that sort. Essentially, for us, there are two forms of ritual in modern-day Asatru. One is called the blot. B-L-O-T rhymes with boat. Blot is an honoring. In it, we use mead, good old Indo-European fluid that it is, as a vehicle for the divine energy. A blot is all about mutual exchange. Our relationship with the gods is one of kin and friends. We believe that the holy powers are actually related to us, that we are bound to them as kin, and also that they are friends. And what one does with friends and kin in Germanic society is give gifts. Mm-hmm. The gift that we give is not a slaughtered goat. It is not even the mead in the horn that we pass around and use as a libation. The real gift, as I express it in I use the word liturgy, is our might, our main, our troth. Troth, of course, being a loyalty, in essence. I guess in the word betrothed. And the gods, in turn, give us gifts. They give us the gifts of inspiration. They give us broader vision. They give us an inspiration of what we can be and what the world can be. So that's basically what a blot is. A sumbel is a special rite in which a horn is passed around a circle and people make toasts. And that sounds very superficial, but the symbolism behind it is quite a lot deeper. The horn represents the well of the past, the well of Earth in Old Norse mythology. All of us have laid our deeds in the well, because this is the well of past, the well in the well of fate or of destiny, however you choose to think of that. Our deeds go into that, and we can summon up not just our deeds, but the deeds of all who have put their might and main into the well. We can bring the power from the past into the present so that we can then use it for our purposes and our problems that normal people face in the real world in the 21st century. And that's what the toasting thing is all about. We don't get drunk at Sumbles. This is not a wild Viking party like in the movies or anything of that sort. These are our two major ritual forms, Blot and Sumble. Both are reverent. They can be, I think, highly inspiring, but they are not. They're not anything that any of your readers are going to have any problems with.
No, I think so. Also, mention a few. Talk a little bit about the interest, the kind of renewed interest in paganism that the people are taking, even in America and in Europe as well. I mean, you mentioned in your article that 30 or 40 years ago, if someone saw Thor's hammer, they thought that was just some necklace you happen to wear, something like that. But now people actually recognize it as something meaningful. So just talk a little bit about some of the new members you've received, some of the new interest, and then also if you could give us also a vision of where paganism might be headed in the coming decades. As I mean, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but as this civilization we've been living in seems to further down its road towards collapse.
Okay, to go to your first question first, I think that more and more people are looking for something that really speaks to them as people of their heritage. And that probably is true of people of all heritages, not just people who are European descent. We did a poll recently, a little survey that we took amongst members of the Asatru Folk Assembly. And overwhelmingly, the reason that most people joined was to relate to their heritage as a person of European ancestry. People are looking for roots. People are looking for something that goes beyond the consumer mentality, something that goes beyond the superficialities and the lack of depth that we find around us in what passes for popular culture here in the United States and in the industrialized West in general.
Yeah.
People are finding that the old ways, the old truths, are still relevant. Asatru today is not for Vikings. Asatru today is not for Germanic tribalists. Asatru today is for students and soldiers and writers and factory workers and taxi drivers, ordinary people with the problems that really are part of the human condition. How can I live my life with honor? How can I find joy in my life? How can I make my marriage work? How can I build a family that works? All of these things are eternal. And Asatru is, in that respect, just as modern as any other religion. We don't live in the past. We don't wear the funny clothes. We don't run around on the streets speaking Old Norse. We're basically just ordinary people. Many of us, more and more and more, are Middle America. We are the people who have been disenfranchised in some respects. We have been ignored by the trend of history. We have been robbed of our inheritance. We've been cut off from who we are. And this is a way of reconnecting with who we are.
Speak a little more about your vision of the future of Asatru.
Well, yes, I do see a future for us, especially as the situation around us gets worse and worse. I believe that Asatru will grow and that it will take its place at the table of American religions and be able to provide input into the crises that are facing us in the current era. We are not interested in supplanting Christianity. We are not interested in converting everyone to Al-Satru or any other version of European pre-Christian belief. I am absolutely willing to work hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder with anyone who is working for the interests of our people.
Right.
I work with Christians, I work with atheists, I work with agnostics. None of that matters, because if we as a people cease to exist, then the religion becomes irrelevant. The religion, in a sense, ceases to exist. It can't be carried on by anyone except people of European heritage. So, yes, I think that the crises of our time will bring more and more people to us. I think our task is to do that in a way that is intelligent, to do that in a way that is not living in the past, and to make the old beliefs, the ancient beliefs, relevant to ordinary men and women in the 21st century. If we can do that, we will grow.
Well, Stephen, let's leave it at that for now, but I'd love to have you back on to talk about paganism or to talk about other issues facing our people.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thank you very much.